Holy cats, we got a crowd this morning. Must be Monday.
Morning, Jason.
How is everyone today?
Jason.
All right, let's jump in a little bit. August 1st is an important day in Minnesota because that's a day that annually speaking, all new forms are updated for our clients. And the review process starts well before that. But the realtor associations throughout the state come together, working together to try and figure out how to make the forms compliant with any law changes and things like that that happen over the course of the year. So on August 1st, that process is finalized, and then the new forms are expected to be used. And that process is pretty ridiculous in the back end. Thankfully, we don't have to be part of it. We just get the changes. And Melissa went through this in the team meeting, but because it happens once a year, it's important that we kind of walk through that process again and just talk about what changes have been made so that when we're presenting the various forms, we're on point with what they are. The first thing that she pointed out is that in general, when you're looking at a form in the bottom left corner, there's an update code or a version code, I guess would be the better way to put it. And it should look something like this. Let's see if we can pull one up and get lucky with it being accurate. The forms process is also strangely a little more complicated than that. But when we get them, we revise them and then update them. And then we have to notify all kinds of people. It's a really strange process. So sometimes we get new forms but don't update them right away. And that's bad news. But as you can see, this is where I'm talking about that code. This is dated August 25. So when you are representing your clients, it's important that you use that your documents be showing that code in the bottom left-hand corner of of each page. And as you're representing your clients, anything presented to you from somebody else is also shown that way. Now, you're going to call out right away and rightly that this form, this is our form, but it has a different broker and it's not even updated to our thing. Our logo isn't in the corner. So we're going to have to talk to Melissa and get that straightened out today because we can't be using these company forms with somebody else's name. Yeah, that's probably not ideal at all. So we'll get that fixed today. In addition to that, there are a number of different changes throughout the forms. We're going to go over them now. I'll make this a little bit bigger, but this one is on the buyer rep contract, lines 22 and 23, and further down on line 39. So let's actually take a look at the form. 22, 23. Compensation for the purchase, lease, rental, or management of real estate property shall be determined between each individual broker and the broker's client. Broker commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. As we've talked about presenting these in the past, I think it's really important always that when you're presenting this to a client, the bold print is put in bold for a reason. And it's really important to cover that, often word for word. In the other sections, you kind of have to explain it more because it gets into a little bit more legal ease, but these ones pretty clearly are intended to be communicated as is to the client. And that's why they put them in bold. So the fact that this has changed is once again set to be clear that commissions are fully negotiable. When they say fully negotiable, what does that mean? And that's an open-ended question for you guys, because I mean, somebody someday is going to ask you that, and I know what I think when I read that, but does that mean that I can negotiate with you on your rate? I'll take any opinions.
Yes, it means you can negotiate on the rate, but you don't have to take the negotiation.
Right. Right. I mean, that's exactly it. In either case, hamburger makers are allowed to set prices in any way that they want. And those prices are not set by law. And essentially, they are fully negotiable. It's just that McDonald's puts the price in front of you. And there's no reason as an agent that you aren't in the same place. Just because something is negotiable doesn't mean that one, that you have to go with or you have to be open to changing your rate. You do not. McDonald's doesn't go, oh, well, we can change the hamburger price for you because you do a lot of business with us. It's just this is the price of hamburgers here. And if you want to go somewhere else, they are different. And the best evidence you can see of that is if you've ever been to an airport McDonald's and looked at the prices there. They're completely different. They don't have to maintain the same price in every place. They change, but they set their price, and the client has the option of choosing to use that service or that price where they're at. And so helping your clients understand that when they hear the term fully negotiable, it's not like we sit down and I say, I'm going to do this at 3.5, and you say, well, I'll do it at 2, and then we come to the middle somewhere. This is what I charge. And that doesn't mean that somebody else might not charge that or might charge more or less, but they are not set by law. And as a result, you have the opportunity to discuss that with the client in that capacity.
Building
Um,
on that too, Jason.
yep.
Building on that too, um I always think of, gosh, one of the first classes I attended with you last week where you were like, yes, it's negotiable, but what does that say to your client if you negotiate down, like, let's say just it's like 2.7%. If you negotiate lower than 2.7, how do you portray to your client of what you're willing to do for them in the
Yeah,
transaction?
how does that reflect your negotiation skills? And frankly, I mean, if you're first personing it between you and a client, if I were to reduce my rate, how does that reflect the negotiation skills I'm going to bring to the table when I'm
Right.
representing the price of your home? And, if I'm not willing to stand up for what I think I'm worth, why in the world would I be willing to stand up for what you think your property is worth, right? So, it's not like you want to stonewall, and that's not an effective way to handle a challenge or in this case an objection. Typically, there is a format and a skill process that readily addresses any objection you might have, and that typical format is what we call feel, felt, found. And you might say something like, Yulia, I know how you feel. A lot of clients feel or have heard that real estate agents make a considerable amount of money. What they have found is that when all of the fees and processes and things are taken care of, that um, in the end, it's not any different from any other job or how it's figured. They're just interested in representing the best deal that they can for their clients. And if there was a way to do it cheaper, we probably would. With literally tens of thousands of real estate agents in the state of Minnesota, if people could do it for cheaper, they'd be out there and they'd be winning the game. That's just how markets work. But that feel, felt, found process, kind of strange in this one because we just throw it out there, but that is a typical great way to handle any objection you have, is restating how the person feels, um, explaining that they're not alone in that process, and then explaining new information to them that may be relevant to changing their mind. And that's what's called feel, felt, found. We'll talk about that a little bit more frequently as well, but that's super important to build that way of handling people's objections. Down here in 38 through 40, this used to have a shall and shall not button, and you would click on shall or shall not. The form itself now just makes it clear that if the broker provides compensation, and again, that's broker to broker compensation, and a company who does that, or a group that does that here in the Twin Cities is DeRochers. If you do a deal with DeRochers representing the listing agent, they always do broker to broker compensation. And a lot of times you'll see them advertise it, and it's all over the board. I mean, sometimes it's 2.7, sometimes it's 3. I've seen them do higher than 3 a few times. A lot of times builders will also do broker to broker compensation. And what this contract change represents is that if broker to broker compensation is paid, that percentage that they pay will reduce what the buyers have to pay their agent. Rather than in the past where it was unclear, you could technically, contractually, if you clicked shall not, could force your clients to have to pay you in addition to what you received from the seller. So you can imagine that from a confusion standpoint, that could be fairly confusing for clients, and for unscrupulous people, a real loophole to set them up, their clients up for a bad thing. So this is a very useful uh, um, clarification and streamlining of the documentation. So that's what she talked about here. On the next page in the listing contract, we'll jump to 113. We'll have to pull that one up real quick. 12. So again, very clearly the compensation for the sale, lease, rental, commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. So we're just clarifying again that rates can be different. They're not set by law. I think a lot of times in the old days, prior to the NAR settlement, it might be common for real estate agents to say something like, "This is the standard rate." That's the kind of language that gets people in trouble because there's an implication that that's that it's not in some way that it can't differ from place to place, when in reality it could very well differ from place to place. And that's really what they were trying to get away from, is this idea that I shouldn't shop around for rates because they're all the same. And that's probably an important clarification. 119, let's jump ahead to that. Seller shall pay broker as total broker's compensation, percent of the selling price, or blank, whichever is greater. And this one here, they just changed the wording of this. So this is, I mean, this is the same thing as it always been. It's just a little bit more clear. And then here, I think we move back to 133. If the seller agrees to pay buyer's broker compensation directly to buyer broker, then seller's obligation to pay broker's compensation shall be reduced by the amount paid up to blank or blank of the selling price. So if the seller, so in the case of your listing, paying the compensation to the buyer's broker, this says that that will reduce that that does reduce that percentage. So again, it's the same clarification. But I don't, just being clear here. So I think this one really helps clear up if the buyer's representative is paying less. If the buyers are paying less percentage than you are offering, then you don't have to pay the extra, if that makes sense. So let's say as a seller, you've agreed to pay the broker 2.7% of the selling price, and the buyer representatives and the buyer and the representative have agreed to do the job for 2.5%, then they don't have to pay that difference, which I don't know. That's just a lot of garbagey talk for why we typically absolutely agree that 125 you go shall not. I can't stress enough that cooperating broker compensation, that doesn't work I should say, it doesn't work well for your sellers. And as a result, you probably shouldn't should work very hard on not having them do that process. Go ahead, Krista.
Jason, I was just going to ask, in that situation, if it ever happened where the buyer would only pay 2.5% instead of the 2.7, would the seller make up the 0.2%? Or would
You
they
mean if
have
the
to, or
seller
where
was
would that
offering
come from?
2.5, if the seller was offering 2.5 and the buyer contracted at 2.7?
Oh, maybe I do have that switched around. I'm sorry if that was
Because
confusing.
if that was the case, if you sign a buyer at 2.7 and the seller offers to
Mhm.
pay you 2.5, the buyer is on the hook for that 0.2%.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
Now,
Thank you for clarifying.
over the course of time, most realtors I know do not pursue that difference, even if they're contractually
Sure.
obligated.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think your buyers, to me, it's a better business practice not to chase that 0.2. Because on a $400,000 house, it's like $800.
Right.
Which
Is it worth
I gotta be
it?
honest with you, that's two car payments for a lot of people. That's not a zero sum or a zero amount of money. But at the same point in time, it's also a reflection on your negotiation skills, to not get that extra 800. So, you know
Got
what I
it.
mean? I don't think I'm gonna take anybody to the cleaners for that $800. Which again, it's not a zero amount of money. That money can make a huge difference. And if you took that $800 and you were 18 years old and put it in a bank account and just let it sit there, you'd have a fortune by the time you were old. So it's real money, but that might not be the best pursuit of that. But the buyer would be on the hook for that amount, not the seller.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right, so moving through Melissa's presentation. As she mentioned in this one, so let's just talk about that while we're in here. The locking of mortgage interest rate, the rate shall be locked with the lender's buyer by within 5 days or any time prior to the closing as required by the lender. That's lender driven, but this whole section, and we can jump over to a purchase agreement. Man, we are just cooking through the forms today, aren't we? So here's a really, while we're here, this is actually really solid. Notice this one says 8/20/24, and this one is 8/20/25. This is the one we're looking for. This should be the updated one. So we'll just go over this mortgage financing section in total. Purchase agreement is or is not subject to mortgage financing provisions below. If your clients are not paying cash, then I would always select is. If they're paying cash, then I would go with is not. This section here, first mortgage or first mortgage and financing, that's first mortgage is usually pretty normal for that one, unless there's additional money that's coming through. You need to check the type of loan, conventional, VA, FHA, or USDA, or a third type. That's information you should be able to get fairly quickly from their lender. These two numbers here, you are choosing, because you're writing this before the loan is finalized in some cases, you're putting in a number here, and you should think of this number as the cap that your buyers will pay. And so if the world were to go on fire between the day you write the purchase agreement and the closing, the bank could change their mortgage percentage that they're at. And you're saying my clients will not enter into this deal if the rate goes above a certain percentage. And that that interest rate has to be locked 5 days after the final acceptance date. So, for the most part, that stuff doesn't happen, but I would make sure I would put this number at what, right now, I think if your clients were at 6.5% is what the bank was telling them, I would put in there like 7%, just to protect them in some case. If for some reason the bank came back and said, all right, we reviewed your paperwork one more time and it turns out we're going to charge you 7.5%. This can help you get out of the process depending on what you check down here. The buyer cannot secure financing specified in this purchase agreement. This purchase agreement does not close on the date. Purchase agreement is canceled. Buyer and seller shall immediately sign a cancellation and directing all earnest money here to be paid to, and I would put refunded to the buyer. And if it's a veterans or FHA, it has to be refunded to the buyer. So that's what this section, that this update is about. It's just a little bit more clear that when you submit this paperwork, the lender has to get the mortgage interest rate locked within 5 days prior to final acceptance, which is probably the best thing to do for both parties so that you can move forward. And that just locks the interest rate. That doesn't mean that your buyers can't go out and buy a truck and then suddenly mess up the whole process. They can certainly do that, but that's going to be a different scenario completely. Any questions about this section at all, or mortgages and how they relate to the purchase process?
I do have one question, Jason.
Fire away.
So yes, I'm just going to use yesterday as an example. This weekend, I was with Tasha Wells, and she has a seller's property. Had a ton of people come to the open house this weekend, which was awesome. By 5 p.m. last night, the highest and best had to be in by 5 p.m. The one of them came back at asking price. But then they kind of said, and I don't know if this has to deal with like the mortgage percentage per se, or if it goes in a different place in this contract. They were offering what was asked. And then they said, within the next highest and best, we will go in $3,000 increments up to 421,000. So in that section right there on like 63, 64, that technically would not be, I need a percentage there, not stating what
Okay, this is
the
specifically,
buyers are willing to do.
yeah. This section is specifically relating to the mortgage financing.
Mortgage percentage.
So,
Okay, got it.
in this case, the buyer would either have to have already gotten approval from their lender that they could go to that number.
Okay.
But that would have to do with this particular section is fully based on the rates and not on any other part of the
Mortgage and
process.
rate. Got it. Okay.
When we're talking about escalation clauses, because I think they're important, how did Tasha respond to that? Do you know?
I don't know yet. She had a bunch of other things to do last night with a different client. So I'm not sure kind of what was decided. I know she was gonna talk to the sellers and see what they wanted to do. I believe she was gonna counter on both offers. But I'm not sure what was decided.
Yeah, escalation clauses are, I think a lot of times people use them, uh, to say that they're pretty serious about the offer. I know that, as I've said before, in just about any case, if you ask 10 realtors for their opinions, you're going to get 15 different answers. But
Yeah.
certainly I know a lot of realtors who feel very strongly that if you're gonna write an escalation clause up to a number like that, just write your offer for under, just close to that. Because, you know, I'm gonna come back and say, if you write an escalation clause, personally, Kelly and I in our business are gonna respond to that escalation clause. I'm gonna respond to the other offers, at the same time, but I'm gonna say to the escalation clause specifically, hey, I'm reaching out to all of our buyers and letting them know that there's an escalation clause. But I'll give you this opportunity, since you're the one who put that foot forward. If you want to go with that price and make that price your offer, I will not reach out to the other buyers and we can close it today. Assuming that their escalation clause would put them at the top, right?
Right.
Because it's my job not to, my job as a realtor is to get the best offer on the table for my clients. I really don't care about all the other moving parts, but they've said we're willing to pay $421,000 for this property if somebody else is willing to pay 418. That's what they've said. So I'm just telling them, look, I'm going to go and ask everybody for 422, right? I mean, that's what I'm going to ask for, because I'm going to tell them that I have the best offer I have out here is potentially for 421,000. Do you guys want to do better than that? And if they come back and say 422, then the guy with the escalation clause is out, right? Because they're only going to go to 421.
Right.
Why don't I just skip ahead to all the end of it and just say, hey, if you want to make that offer for 421, we can wrap this up today. The benefit for my seller is that they're getting a high offer. The benefit for the potential buyers is it's just going to be what they wanted to offer, what they theoretically were willing to offer anyway. And it just closes down the process. And I'm going to negotiate in good faith. I'm not going to trick anybody, but I am just going to say, hey, I'm going to call all these people and give them the chance to better that offer. And some agents would not do that. Some agents would respond to that saying,
Sure.
well, I already called for highest and best, so the answers I have on the paper must be the best offer available. And I think that's a very short-sighted way to do business, but I can understand what they're saying.
Sure.
So anyway, highest and
Sorry,
best.
that probably wasn't in the section of the mortgage that we were talking
All
about.
right.
That was probably a little side note. Sorry, Yulia and Kelly.
I think in the end, any interaction between all of us is better for all of us. And
Yeah.
this other part of that, seller agrees to pay buyer's broker compensation, whichever is greater, right? So this is the same thing as always. We're just on the other side of the coin. So typically you're always going to put in that, unless you are doing flat fee real estate, you should always just put 0 in that dollar thing and the percent that you intend to pay. In section on this seller's contribution to buyer's broker compensation, again, I'm going to recommend that you put 0 and 0 and make the buyer negotiate for the compensation rather than just telling them what it's going to be up front. And the reason we feel strongly about that is that we don't know what the buyer and the buyer's representative have negotiated between the two of them for compensation. And as a result, telling them what we're willing to pay is setting ourselves up for potentially paying more. Because if I had a real estate agent who puts on a big sign, I'll help you buy a home for $600, you know, I don't know a lot of them that do that, but if that was out there and you were offering 2.7, which one's going to be more? Well, it's going to be the 2.7 to a buyer. And then you're basically saying, well, I'll just pay this buyer's rep more than they want. And that's not in your seller's best interest. So it's much better to just put the seller in a place where the buyer's team has to negotiate for what they think their thing is worth. and treating that number like a term rather than treating it like some sort of contractual obligation. We negotiate over the price of the house. We negotiate over the closing dates. We can negotiate over compensation the same way, and it doesn't have to affect the sale. Can you tell that almost every single one of these has to do with this compensation thing? Seller contribution to buyer's brokerage shall be blank or blank % of the sales price. This is in the counter offer. This did not used to be in there, but if you made an offer and they countered that offer at a lower compensation rate, this is how you do that. So let's say, for example, you were representing the seller and the buyer said, I would like to be compensated 15% of the price at the seller's expense. You might not agree with that. And this is where you can indicate that number. This here helps in the compensation disclosure to really more clearly sell out or specify who's getting what are the dollar terms in the compensation disclosure, and who's paying what, and what compensation comes from the broker, what compensation comes from the seller, and what compensation comes from the buyer and tenant. So if I'm doing broker to broker compensation, where I list that up front, that would be here. If we have a negotiated portion, that's from the seller here. Boy, did she load us up this time. This one's a pretty clear thing in the property disclosure, but are you aware of any professional remediation efforts to eliminate odors? That's a simple yes or no, and what happened if so. Useful information, but I think if you have strong allergies or things like that, that could be something that you're concerned about. And in a property disclosure, it just makes good sense to make sure you're covering that. If you're interested in additional updates on any of these, there is a forms update from the Minnesota Association of Realtors. You get 1 credit hour if you take the class on August 13th or 18th. You can register for those. The 13th is a class from 1 to 2. August 18th is 9 to 10. It is 1 hour of CE. It's $15 if you're a member of SPAR or MAR, and you're all SPAR, so that's fine. And it's a live class via Zoom. So if you're super excited about learning more about this, you are welcome to do so. I'll be seeing about Greg's class. Like, did he publish that somewhere? If he did, I'll of course forward that on to you. So any questions about those changes at all? Anywhere? Anyone? Bueller. Very cool. Kelly or Yulia, are there any particular forms that you guys need help with, practice on, want to talk about today that we haven't touched on yet or need to talk about?
Not necessarily right now, but if I have an existing contract, do I have to go back and redo it now that the forms are updated?
That is a fantastic question, and the answer is no. You
Thank you,
do
Jesus.
not use these forms going forward, but any existing contracts you have are still relevant and current until such time as you need to re-sign those.
Okay.
And those the dates the dates on your contract are how people would know that. So when they sign the contract, there's the date sections, and as long as those dates are prior to August, then they are still current.
Okay.
Any other questions on those today? How about you, Yulia? Anything in there that's making you scratch your head?
No.
Other than maybe for me, every time Melissa gets up there, it's super useful information, but I struggle with detail, so I have to figure it out like a lot of times to kind of get it right for me.
I do like that they kind of changed around the shall and shall not and made it easier.
Yeah, I'll be honest, when new agents start, that just is a confusing set of, it's just a web, and you have an understanding as an agent of what that means. Imagine not knowing what it means at all, having somebody who's new to the business explain something confusing to you. It just was a recipe for disaster. So I'm really glad that they uh, updated that as well. It just didn't need to be that hard. Um, I think it's interesting, and I'm going to just take a look at this because this shows agency shows 825 being different. And I'm curious why that would be. That's clearly new, so what in the world? I don't know, I'm gonna have to ask Melissa about that one because none of it looks that different to me. And again, agency is the one form that we talk about probably more than most other forms, just because it, one, goes with every transaction, and two, is a disclosure that we give to anybody that is interested in in some sort of discussion about real estate. So again, the main sections are, early in any relationship. That's pretty undefined. That you discuss consumers, what type of agency representation or relationship they desire. The available options are below. This is not a contract, just tells you what the jobs in a real estate transaction are. If you are interested in having somebody perform one of those jobs for you, you do have to sign a contract according to law, right? Until then, you are just a customer and you do not have representation in the process. And so this is one of those things where you're having the initial consultations with your clients or just even talking about it. There is some value to that. We've talked before about when you're doing an open house, is this something that people have to sign? The strictest interpretation of the law indicates that you probably should have somebody sign this. The realistic situation is that if you were to go to a couple open houses over the weekend, I don't believe you'd find anybody actually having anyone sign disclosure at those events. One thing you can do, and I'm just going to go over this relatively quickly, but if you take this form and you save it as a PDF, it gets downloaded right there into my computer. I can go into, get out of there, open up a new window. I'm going to open up my Google Drive and get kind of crazy here. Download this thing into my Google Drive. cats. That's ridiculous. Oh my word. I would make this even easier on myself. Go back to my drive. I'm gonna create a new folder, email documents. Then I'm gonna take that same form and I'm gonna drop it into email documents. Hello. I click on this and hit share and copy the link. I can go to Gmail. Into my settings. Have a faster computer, by the way, it'll make you happier. Go and see all settings. You can add that into your signature down here. Say something like agency. Click, highlight your text, click on the link, paste that link you just put in there, and now anybody who clicks on that can see that form, as long as I go down to the bottom and hit Save Changes. So now you'll be excited that if you ever get an email from this particular email address from me, you can send that form out. And that can be a really nice way to make sure that you're being some people have that as part of their email signature. It's not a law, it's not a requirement. Some people just prefer to present that way and have it available to their clients at any time. Any questions on that? Cool enough. Well, if that's all we've got for today, we can go ahead and wrap up. And we have covered today's updates, or this month's updates from Melissa. And we'll be in class tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Jason, I do have one question. Doesn't have to do really with this though, but
Fire away.
with the shared folder you sent us where we fill out
Mhm.
like our
Yep.
contacts and stuff, when we enter it in, does it automatically update for you as well? Or do we have to reset share it with you?
You don't have to, no, I can see anything that you put in there.
Okay.
And you can see anything that I put in there as well. So, for example, there you go, right? So those are your most recent updates, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. That's the joy and beauty of using Google Drive and why we're choosing it this way. But I think it makes a big difference in that format.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I don't think so. I can just log into Command and go find those forms and print them, correct?
You will find all of the forms that we talked about today. You will find them in MLS, Tools,
Okay.
and Transaction Desk. Transaction Desk will take you to your agent dashboard, and then You find all of your forms here. Under forms, if you're just doing individual forms. If you're actually going to engage in a transaction with a client, as in I'm doing this for a client as opposed to my own review, you're going to do transactions, add a new one, name it, and use the wizard based on the various templates that they are. Is it a buyer? Is it listing? Or is it a purchase agreement? And if you use the wizard, it will pull all the forms
Okay.
for you that you need.
Great. Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions?
How was your weekend?
Busy, busy for sure. Went to a concert last night, and it's always frightening when you go to a concert and your pockets are filled with Advil and earplugs. That's how you know you're old. You've crossed the threshold when all of your pockets are filled with Advil and earplugs. So
That's
got
funny.
that going for you. All right. So we'll see everybody on Tuesday then.
All right.
Thank you.
Perfect. We'll see you next time here on The Feud, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.